Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to this session on SOC2 HIPAA and HITRUST. So today we are going to talk a most relevant topic with all the shared services and software as a service products that we are using. The relevance which we need to keep on, or the relevance for SOC2 and the regulatory regulations behind it, is a very key parameter which we need to understand. So to discuss about that, today we have two eminent speakers with us. So we have Mr. Karthik Ramachandran and we have Mr. Satish Sridharan, who are going to discuss on this topic with us today. So a brief introduction about both of them. So first I'll introduce Mr. Karthik Ramachandran. Karthik Ramachandran is a director with Deloitte's risk advisory practice and has 12 plus years of experience, which spans across areas like information security reviews, SOC 1, SOC 2 testing, SOX testing, etc. He has worked with clients across a range of industries, including banking industry, insurance, financial services, IT, ITES, manufacturing, and healthcare industries. Karthik is a bachelor in engineering and is also a CISA. He has experience in managing and working and delivering SOC 1 and SOC 2 engagements for clients in Canada, UK, and across other places. Now I introduce Satish Sridharan. He is an associate director with risk advisory practice of Deloitte with more than 10 years of experience. He has worked on multiple engagements in process reviews, consulting, development of standard operating procedures, risk assessments, SOX compliances, SSAE 18, GICI, CFR assignments, etc. He predominantly handles SOC engagements in third-party assurance space. Satish is a chartered accountant and is also a CISA. So with no further delay, I will hand over the session to the speakers.
Thank you, Deepika. Very good morning, everyone. It's always a pleasure to be part of this, to present on this topic and also be part of IIA as well. I would thank IIA for giving us an opportunity to in today's session and also to talk about SOC 2 plus HITRUST and HIPAA. Yes, so Satish, can we?
Yes, Karthik, I have shared the screen.
Thank you. So thank you. Yeah. So SOC 2 plus HIPAA and HITRUST, it's kind of emerging as on today. So there are a lot more requests coming up in terms of what is HIPAA, what is HITRUST, and what are the relevance between HIPAA and HITRUST. So within India, especially in the SaaS market, or rather, you talk about any product related services or a cloud hosting services, there are a lot of requirements that are coming up in terms of HIPAA assessment. And then there are also in terms of HITRUST. So many people, first of all, they want to understand what is HITRUST all about and what are the applicability of HITRUST. HITRUST predominantly everybody feels is more related to the healthcare, but I would differ with that opinion, which we will cover it as part of today's session. Is it HITRUST only for healthcare or also applicable for other industries or not, which will take through. So this is going to be a huge topic. It's actually, we can talk about it for the entire day, but we are trying to, cover it, the relevance of, on these topics. But feel free to ask any questions, we'll be happy to answer and or at least get back to you. Yeah. So can you go to previous slide, Harish? Satish, sorry. Yeah. So learning objectives today. So we'll get an overview and understanding of HIPAA regulation and its implication. With understanding of SOC 2, SOC 2 plus and the relevance of it. We can also get an overview and understanding of HITRUST, understanding the key controls around the cloud and API. The reason is, so today, most of the product companies, have an interface with a third party. While there's a third party, interface, or, if you want to use a mobile application for many of your, the data view or data approvals, etc. API plays a key role in terms of integrating two systems. So thereby there is required some sort of security awareness around that, which is also been factored as part of the SOC 2 reports, HIPAA or HITRUST for that matter. So hence, we need to also have some sort of an overview on APIs. Cloud, I think all of us will agree, too much of noise around cloud. Everybody keeps talking about cloud. Uh, but from a HIPAA and a HITRUST or a SOC 2 plus HIPAA HITRUST standpoint of view, we touch upon what are some of the secured cloud framework or cloud areas that are of utmost risk. We'll touch upon that. And then finally, we have something called user entity control consideration. That is a very key attribute for the reason today, almost all of our data is in Azure or in the Amazon, right? So typically, one is the lack of awareness where we tend to rely on the SOC report, whatever Amazon provides or the Azure provides. But there's also an element within those reports which you as an organization should also adhere upon, right? So there's a section in the report that brings out which are the specific controls where Amazon or Azure is not responsible for. They clearly articulate the controls which will be completely under the responsibility of the organizations, right? For example, the user organization we talk about. So we'll touch upon what is it and how do you understand that and how do we ensure that you also read through the specific section as part of the report and you have to also review those controls to ensure the risk is getting completely addressed. So these are today's objective and here we get started. Yeah. Next slide. Okay. Why HIPAA and HITRUST, right? What is it that, why is it so much of, importance are being given for the healthcare, right? So the medical records, as all of you will agree, the medical records are of information full of contact, payment data, medications, insurance information, social security numbers, and much more, right? So you take a medical record of an individual, you will have everything, about the particular the patient, right? Or rather, the enough info in the medical record to steal someone's identity and commit insurance fraud or medication fraud or financial theft, even blackmail, right? That is the reason the medical data breaches surpasses the financial breaches today, and that is where the need of the HIPAA HITRUST is really emerging a lot. While we're also trying to create an awareness, we're trying to also emphasis upon they require some regulatory governance or rather the risk, how to assess the risk of this entire healthcare products or the applications, and thereby we also have to figure out how do we mitigate that, right? Yeah, next slide. So we'll talk about the basics of HIPAA. So why was HIPAA created, right? Which is it's a very probably the first reason that we'll have to understand why was HIPAA even created. But most of us think HIPAA was created only to address the security and the privacy part of it. But the answer is typically no. When you read through this slide, you will have a different opinion altogether. The security and privacy just an element of it. So the HIPAA was created to improve the portability and accountability of health insurance coverage for employees between jobs, to combat waste, fraud, and abuse in health insurance and healthcare delivery. The Act also contained passages to promote the use of medical savings accounts by introducing tax breaks, provide coverage for employees with pre-existing medical conditions, and simplifies the administration of the health insurance. The procedures for simplifying the administration of health insurance became a vehicle to encourage the healthcare industry to computerize the patient medical records. That is where the theme of the security and privacy came in, because the regulatory body started pushing that all of these medical records can probably get computerized, thereby moving away from the physical forms to the computerized version. Thereby, all of it will get stored and it can be accessed at one place, and thereby the additional security and privacy controls came in. The particular part of the acts formed the Health Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health Act, which is HITECH in 2009, which in turn led to the introduction of the Meaningful Use of Incentive Program, which is nothing but moving to the digitalization world, moved from the paper to the computerized version. So most important piece of healthcare recently passed in this 20, 30 years, right? So that is where they say that it is actually evolving HIPAA. It is more like a law. I want to make it very clear. HIPAA is not like a standard. HIPAA is a law and is not like a framework again. The law is required to be adhered, right, by the covered entity, which will be your medical practitioners or, the etc. And thereby, the IT, which is supporting the product through which all the medical records are being, stored or, through which it has been accessed. And that IT applications are also being managed by a third party. Then they are so-called as a business associates, which also we'll talk about in the upcoming slides. Yeah, next slide. So a key dates in, the HIPAA is that August 1996, HIPAA signed into a law by President Bill Clinton, and April 2003, the effective date of HIPAA privacy rule came in, and then April 2005, the effective date of HIPAA security rule came in. So privacy came first, and then came the security rule, and then thereby there were also many addendums to the HIPAA, right? So then there came the breach enforcement rule was getting added to it, and then the high tech rule, which talks more or rather specific more on the IT, information technology security aspects of it. It also evolved in 2009, and finally the omnibus rule, which came up in March 2013. The omnibus rule is very important. It's respect to entire HIPAA. The reason is, HIPAA as such is more like a law, right? But then omnibus rule, it tells you exactly how to configure or what you need to do to adhere to the law. So rather, if you're looking for a specific, like other framework in terms of the implementation, I think you have to refer to the omnibus rule. We'll also talk about in the upcoming slide. But omnibus rule gives a more clarity at a granular level. What is it that an organization should do to implement the HIPAA law? Next slide. So a quick overview on the HIPAA privacy and security rules. So once HIPAA has been signed into law, the US Department of Health and Human Services set about creating the first security and privacy and security rule. The privacy rule had an effective compliance date of April 14, 2003, and it defined protected health information, the PHI, as any information held by a covered entity which concerns the health status. And then the instructions were issued on how the PHI should be disclosed, and that permission should be sought from the patients before using their personal information for marketing, fundraising, or a research. That became a key, because while you were trying to bring a theme that everything should be computerized in terms of the medical records, etc., it is also very much important that we pay utmost attention to ensure that the personal information are not used for marketing, fundraising, or a research point of view. And there came a law about that all the covered entity or client will be to force 2 years after original registration on April 21, 2005, dealing significantly with the PHI. The security rule down 3 security safeguards: administrative, physical, and technical. Then that must be adhered to in full in order to comply with HIPAA. So administrative is to create policies and procedure. Physical is to control the physical access area of data storage to protect against inappropriate access. Technical is to protect the communication between the PHI when transmitted electronically over the open net. So these three are typically the themes, I would say. So under all these three, there are quite a number of rules that are required to be adhered upon, which we'll talk about in the next slides. Yeah, next slide. So omnibus rule. So as I said earlier, the omnibus rule predominantly it complements the HIPAA rule, where omnibus rule becomes more specific in terms of it gives a guidance to the organization in terms of how do they have to probably implement a HIPAA rule. For example, if you look into the specific encryption standards laid down by HIPAA, you will not even have an idea in terms of what is encryption key, what is algorithm required to be put in place. So in order to render an ePHI unusable, undecipherable, and unreadable in the event of a breach, so what is it that encryption that you need to use, right? So omnibus rule gives you the clarity in terms of what you need to perform. While HIPAA rule also, in a generic word, they called as a workforce. So workforce means what, right? So it's a very generic term. What do you mean by workforce? That is what is being referred in the HIPAA rule. While omnibus rule tells you even more in granular level, what is that workforce? Then it says that it starts from employee to volunteers, trainees, contractors, etc. So thereby it expands little more to give you a clarity what is that particular workforce is all to be meant with. And then the privacy security rules were also amended to allow patients' health record to be held indefinitely. Right. So while initially it was for about 50 years, but then the omnibus rule extended that to that the data can be held indefinitely. Amendments were also included to account for the changing the work practices brought about by technological advancements, covering the use of mobile devices in particular. So omnibus rule also talks about if you're using a mobile device to access some of the data, then what are the security controls that are required to be put in place. And a significant number of healthcare professions are now using their own mobile device to access and communicate EPHI. And the final omnibus rule includes now the administrative procedure and policies to account that, right? So I think it's quite clear to all of you that if in case you wanted to get some clarity in terms of the implementation of the HIPAA, I think you also need to consider the omnibus rule, which will give you a clarity in terms of how do you evaluate against the HIPAA law, right? Yeah, next slide. So there are the omnibus final rule is compromised on the following four final sorry about the four final rules which has been probably expanded a little bit more. So one is making the business associates of the covered entity to be directly liable for the compliance with certain of the HIPAA privacy security rule requirements. Strengthen the limitation on the use and disclosure of the PHI data. It is not allowed for the marketing or fundraising purpose. Expand the individual rights to receive electronic copies of their health information and to receive the disclosures to a health plan concerning treatment. Require modification or redistribution of the covered entity notice of privacy practices. Modify the individual authorization and other requirements to facilitate the research and disclosure of the child immunization proof to the schools. Adopt the additional high-tech act amendments to the enforcement rule not previously adopted in October 30, 2009, while the interim fine such as provision addressing the enforcement of non-compliance with the HIPAA rule to the willful neglect. So these are some of the aspects which are required to be, which are being more covered as part of the omnibus rule. The reason why I'm talking about this omnibus rule in length and also about HIPAA is that while you are looking for a HIPAA compliant, right, you also need to consider these extensions so that you are able to understand this HIPAA law in detail, and then while you are implementing it, you also capture these relevant frameworks that will help you act as a guidance for you in the implementation per se. Yeah, next slide. And we had something called breach notification rule of the high-tech 2019. So the HIPAA history continued 2009 with the introduction of Health Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health Act, which is nothing but high-tech, again came out with a lot of extensions to the security, security around the information technology used by these practitioners in terms of, accessing and transmitting the data. So high tech gives you a complete guidance in terms of what is it that you need to put in place in the information technology. There could be a confusion between high tech and omnibus rule, but for all the participants to make it very clear, from a HIPAA rule, there has always been extension on a security aspect, which was getting captured as part of the high tech. What the government did is they brought something called an omnibus rule, which covers all of these amendments, and they made it as one particular document called an omnibus rule. Okay, so high tech was before the omnibus rule, which started adding a lot of amendments to the security and the privacy aspects of it, while omnibus rule was brought in and it was passed to ensure that it captures all of the amendments together, and they call that as an omnibus rule. So while the breach notification talks more in terms of the breaches of the EPHI data, and they also started putting a penalty in case of if there's any breach on the data breach that happens, and all of that if the breach is going to affect more than 500 individuals, and that must be reported to the Department of Health and Human Service Office for Civil Rights. So the criteria for reporting breaches of EPHI were subsequently extended in the final omnibus rule of March 2013. So with this glimpse, right? So what you should have ideally understood is that we had a HIPAA rule, and then we had a high tech that was adding to a lot of amendments in terms of security part of it. And then we had something called a breach notification rule, which added some sort of a spice. If something goes wrong, or somebody does not adhere to the HIPAA rule, and then still they keep on adding a lot of amendments, and finally the government felt rather I keep on revising the version, let's bring one framework called omnibus rule and put everything under that umbrella, and that's exactly what they did. And it came in effective in March 2013. Okay, yeah, next slide. Now, HIPAA had about 5 titles, so which I think we spoke about. Many have a notion that HIPAA is predominantly only required for security and privacy part of it. That is a myth. Typically, it happens in most of the service provider companies as on today. But to answer the question very straight, it is not. It is the answer is not the case. Whereas HIPAA was initially created with various other purpose which you spoke about. But security and privacy, it was been added because they wanted to modernize the flow of healthcare information, stipulate how personally identified information can be maintained by healthcare and healthcare insurance industries, and that should be protected from the fraud and theft. While they were trying to modernize the way the data is being collected, data is being transmitted, data is getting stored, but they also need to ensure that the data should also be secured, and also the data should be protected from the theft and fraudulent activities, and hence they brought this security and privacy element getting added to the HIPAA law. Yep. Next slide. So HIPAA, as we said, we have privacy rule, we have a security rule. The privacy rule was effective from April 14, 2003, while security rule came in 2005. The rule set international standards for protection of individual identified health information by 3 types of covered entities, which are health plan, healthcare clearing houses, and healthcare providers who conduct the standard healthcare transactions electronically. While security rule, the rule sets national standards for protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and the availability of the EPHI data. What is the difference between PHI, EPHI data? Now, assuming I have a medical record by name Karthik Ramachandran, and this is my date of birth, this is my the insurance ID, this is my health, the concerns. So all of it is actually a the PHI data, right? Now, while this data gets stored in electronic format, it becomes your EPHI data, right? Now, this security gets applicable on EPHI data for the reason that the security is required while the data gets stored in an electronical format, right? While the data can also be stored in the paper, right? It can also be stored in the notebook, or it can be kept in the cupboard and can be locked. But still, the privacy is required. Okay. So thereby, the privacy, it typically talks for the entire PHI data, while security focuses more on the EPHI data because the data is electronically stored and probably in the cloud or in a server through gets transmitted over a network. Hence, security is required to be looked into the various elements of the data, transfer data storage, and hence the security gets focused more on the EPHI part of that. Next slide. Any questions, guys, until now? Ram Mathur, yeah, please go ahead. You can unmute yourself, or Deepika, I think there's a question, hand raised by Ram Mathur.
Yeah. Hi, Karthik. Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you, Ram. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. So you mentioned about this omnibus rule, and you were saying that omnibus rule brings about the amendments that high tech was trying to bring to the HIPAA Act, main act. So, like for example, the security, the extensions that they have brought, by the US has brought to the HIPAA Act, security extensions. So, from a, let's say, a business associate's perspective, is it enough to comply with the obligations of omnibus rule if you want to comply with high tech, or rather, if I'll put it this way, is there any obligation in high tech that we would miss out by if we just comply with the omnibus rule? Is that?
Yeah, sure. Very good question, Ram. So let me put this flow in this way, right? First
Okay.
of all, omnibus rule was not an extension of the high-tech, but after high-tech, was important, after high-tech, was being formed, they also kept on adding a lot of amendments to that.
Hmm.
So while, they can't keep on releasing versions after versions, right? So then what they decided is that let's put all of the versions together, all of the amendments together and put that as under an omnibus rule. So if you look into omnibus rule, a guidance in terms of, how the HIPAA rule, for example, the password, right? It may say the password should be, configured, right? But what is the password, the configuration should look like, right? So if you refer the HIPAA law, so HIPAA law is the base. First is your HIPAA law, okay? And then
Okay.
you will also have to consider high-tech rule. And then you also require to consider the omnibus rule. And combined with HIPAA, you need to factor in all of these four. Only then you will be able to get a complete picture in terms of what is it that you need to adhere upon. But from a business associate standpoint of view, HIPAA, while you look into the HIPAA rule, there is a specific, the security and the privacy rules of that. And high-tech predominantly talks about the information technology, which you can apply to that. And then the breach notification or reporting to the regulatory authority comes under covered entity purview. It is not your purview, but you have to report to the covered entity. And then the omnibus rule brings an extension in terms of the compliance, brings extension to the guidance in terms of, how it is required to be configured. So likewise, omnibus gives you even more clarity. And there are also certain other extension also in omnibus, which you also need to look into it. So to answer your question precisely, HIPAA rule is the first. Start from HIPAA rule, go to the high-tech, and then the omnibus rule, and then the breach notification. While all high-tech and omnibus gives more clarity in terms of what you need to do to adhere to the HIPAA rule. Hope I answered your question.
Yes, Karthik, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. One more question from Dharani Kumar Prabhakaran. Yeah. Deepika, you may want to unmute Dharani Kumar Prabhakaran.
Hi,
Yeah,
Karthik.
Dharani
I'm
Kumar.
audible?
Yeah, you are audible. Yeah, go ahead. Good
Okay.
morning. Yeah.
So actually, as you said that HIPAA has two rules. It's like a security as well as a privacy rules. So it's a security rules. It's only talk about ePHI data. What if I stored some PHI data in physical form? Is it
It is there.
applicable for that?
It is there. There's a slide I'm going to talk about it. There's something called a physical security safeguards, which also require to be adhered as part of the HIPAA rule. We'll talk about that in the next slide. It is there. To answer your question, yes, even if you store the data in the physical form, it does require some security measures. But what I said is the security rule predominantly, it applies to the electronic storage of the information, where there's also a subset that also, gets adhered to the physical storage of the data, plus the server room, etc. Yeah.
Thank you, Karthik.
So we'll move on. So this is the the key definitions in terms of what is a healthcare provider, who are the healthcare providers, typically comes under the covered entity. Doctors, psychologists, dentists, therapists, nursing home, pharmacies, and then what is a health plan, insurance companies or company health plan, government program. And then you also have something called healthcare clearing houses. This includes the entity that process non-standard health information they receive from another entity to a standard. So typically they're called as a covered entity. And yeah, next slide. While who is the business associate, right? So business associate typically for are the ones who are assisting the covered entity in terms of accessing the data, or in terms of helping them with a application or a product through which the data can be transmitted or data can get stored. And then I mean typically they'll be more like helping them to do the data analysis, or even helping them to claim the processing or an administration, etc. And you also have something called a subcontractor, an entity that uses the PHA of the business, or helping the business associates to carry out additional work. So even they are also subject to be compliant with the HIPAA rule. And then you have some, and then protected health information, a key definition. I think we know about it. Under HIPAA, the protected health information is considered to be individually identifiable information relating to the past, present, or the future health status of an individual has been created, collected, or transmitted, or maintained by a HIPAA covered entity in relation to the provisions of the healthcare, payment for healthcare services, or used in the healthcare operations. To make it even more precise, if you look at the definition properly, also see the future health status, right? When they say a future health status, it also talks about there are many companies, who collect a lot of data, and then, they give you a report, what your health may look like in 2-3 years. For example, they put a chip in your heart, and that heart, the chip will, read your body on a day-to-day basis, and it will tell you in terms of, what you are probably, looking towards in another 5 years or 6 years from now on. And basis that the medical practitioners prescribe some medicines, prescribe some dietitian prescribe some sort of the diet chart, thereby you're able to trying to address that particular concern. So they monitor the health on a day-to-day basis in a real time basis, which a lot of the medical prescription also happens, and that is what the future health status also comes into picture. Yeah, next slide. So these are the PHI identifiers. I'll pause here for a few seconds for people to quickly glance through it. So it starts from the name, geographical dates, phone number, fax number, emails, SSN number, medical record numbers. If I don't know how many of you are aware, India is also trying to bring something similar to the medical record number. So the government is taking initiative, where they want to digitalize and bring like Aadhaar. Every individual will have a the medical record number. So that's going to be a great transformation in terms of the Indian medical industries as well. So when it comes in, I think it also requires some framework also to put in place. And then we have health insurance number, and then photographic, biometric, IP address, URL, device identifiers, vehicle license number, and the account number. All of it will constitute to the PHI identifiers. Yeah. Next slide. Yeah. Now, so as I said, HIPAA has a security privacy. Now, while it also has a administrative safeguard, and then we have a privacy rule. So yeah, one question very specific. Is PPT visible to everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, the voice is continuously breaking. I will figure it out. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, next slide. So the physical security has three kinds, as we spoke about, and who must comply with security rule is covered entity and the business associate. So both business and the covered entity are required to be compliant with the security rule. So because many of the covered entity, they think the security rule comes under the purview of the business associate, but the answer is strictly no, because there are certain data which probably they can take a hard copy of it and save it within their drives or save it within their own desk. So thereby there's some sort of measures required to protect the physical copies of the data, which is why the covered entity also required to be adhered upon. Not only that, covered entity should own up the security and the measures which the business associate have to drive in. So they also have to take responsibility while they use a third party to develop a product, to store the data. There's also a responsibility by the covered entity to ensure that business associates are responsible, and they're also adhere to this particular rules. Yeah, next slide. So the administrative safeguards has 9 standard. There are 25 implication specifications, while physical safeguard has 4 standard, and then there are 8 implementation specifications. Technical safeguard has 5 standard and then 7 implementation specifications. So what is 9 standard place, and basis which there are specification which will tell you what is required to be implemented to address those specific standards. So standard defines what must be done, and implementation specified how it must be done, and safeguard is a category of the compliance, right? Yeah. Okay, now quickly on the administrative safeguard is a very, very important slide for you to understand. The security management process, a covered entity must identify and analyze the potential risk to the EPHI, which warrants that every the covered entity must also analyze the various risks in place. It is not that it's completely the responsibility of the business associate. The covered entity, which could be a practitioners like the medical practitioners or the health clearing houses or the healthcare healthcare insurance industries as well. So they need to identify and analyze the potential risk to the EPHI, and it must implement security measures that reduce the risk and vulnerability to a reason and appropriate level. And then we also have something called security personnel. A covered entity must designate a security official who is responsible for developing and implementing security policies and procedure. And this security policy procedure will be translated to the business associate. So while I do an audit in many of my own clients, the one typical question they ask is that, Karthik, what should I implement here? What should I do here? The very basic response to that is, first of all, you need to talk to your covered entity and understand, do they have any specifications in terms of what they want the business associates to do, right? Or do they completely leave it under the responsibility of the BA? It becomes even more riskier because the covered entity are subjected to have a security personnel who understand what is this HIPAA is all about, and thereby he clearly puts out in terms of the rules, what is it that be directly applicable to business associate, and also suggest business associate if there are a specific pointers which he feel that they need to probably adhere upon. And then the information access management, it again talks about limiting the usage of access to the data, and also it recommends that there's also adequate the audit log available, and also relevant disclosures of the EPHA. For example, you may have a sub processes who another third party who is supporting the business associate. So in that case, the BA is also trying to disclose certain data to the third party, and they may third party also required to be in compliant. While they are trying to do it, they also have to get relevant clearances from the covered entity. And then the training and management becomes very key. And then evaluation, a covered entity must perform a periodic assessment on how well its security policies and procedure meet the requirements of the security rule. And then the administrative safeguard provision in security rule requires a covered entity to perform this part of their security management process. And the risk analysis and the management provisions of security rule are addressed separately by helping determine the security measures. And then finally, the risk analysis should be an ongoing process because there could be additional technology comes into picture, right? So today I may not use an IoT or I may not take help of an IoT, but then typically, I may use an IoT device to predict the health record of the X or YZ patient. So thereby I'm using additional technology and I'm trying to collect a lot of data, right? So thereby some additional risk is also emerging because I'm using an IoT or collecting a lot of data. And thereby, we also need to assess the risk of it and also figure out how do we mitigate that. Yeah. Next slide. My voice is continuously breaking. Is it better now? I'm trying to be closer to the mic. Yeah. The physical safeguard. So there was a question raised on the physical safeguard of it. A covered entity must limit the physical access to facility while ensuring that authorized access is allowed. And then workstation security. A covered entity must implement policies and procedures to specify proper use of a covered entity must implement policies and procedure to specify proper use of and access to workstation electronic media. A covered entity also must have in place the policies and procedures regarding transfer, removable, disposal, and reuse of the electronic media to ensure the appropriate protection of the EPHI data. To answer the question, is also requires some workstation security and also the facility access and the control. And then we have something on technical safeguard. A covered entity must implement policies and procedure around the access control, and they're also required to audit all the relevant the records. And then the integrity is also required to be ensured because what if something goes altered or destroyed with a wrong intent. there should be some integrity controls also in place, and transmission security also very much required in terms of the encryption over the network or a protocol as such. Yeah. Now, privacy rule talks about the covered entity and the business associates. The applicability is from a covered entity to BA, and then BA also, when I say there's other arrow mark from BA to C covered entity, that means that covered entity is responsible for all the controls what the BA implements. They just cannot, point the finger on BA and then keep aside. Covered entity will have to take complete responsibility and the ownership of what the BA does, right? So that is very, very, very important. So that is why, while I go for many clients, I ask them, what your agreements say with your covered entity. Does your covered entity agreement calls out a specific pointers, or does it not pick out any specific pointers? Typically, most of the companies, the covered entity and the BA agreement does not talk much about it, while you also have to probably push the security person on the covered entity side to ask him to figure out what is it that they want the BA to do. Because the BA does something on their own and they get HIPAA compliant, but still something goes wrong, it should not become a complete onus on the business associate. So I would really urge all of you, to go back and check on your agreement, and then go back to your covered entity, security person, CISO, etc., to figure out, what you guys need to do in order to ensure that, you're compliant over and above the HIPAA rule is something else to be required to be taken care. Okay. Next slide. So what does HIPAA privacy rule cover at the broader level? Principle for use and disclosure, permitted use and disclosure, authorized users and disclosure, limiting the users and disclosure minimum necessary, notice and other individual rights, privacy policies, privacy personnel, workforce training management, mitigation, safeguards, compliance, retaliation, waiver, documentation, record retention, fully insurance group health plan exception, right? So any questions on this, guys? Anyone has any question? Yes, Sudha. I think there's a question.
Yeah, hi Karthik. I have one question.
Yeah.
Actually, this like you told, subcontractor use a PHI data of business associate. So this privacy rule and security rule will also compliance apply to this subcontractor also or not?
Ram, your voice was breaking. Ram, your voice was breaking. Can you come back again?
Actually, my question is this: these compliances apply to subcontractor also if they use the PHI data of business associate. I am audible.
Yeah, I heard until you were saying, is this applicable to business associate? Is that your question?
No. It's applicable to subcontractor if they use the data of business associate, like PHI data of business associate.
Yeah. Maybe you can type your question. Maybe I think I should be able to hear it.
Sir, actually, what he's asking is whether the same rule is applicable to the subcontractor of a business associate for whom this data is applicable.
Yeah. To answer the question straight, yes, the answer is yes. The subcontractors also have to be comply with the HIPAA rule. All that whatever the BA is responsible for, they also, it depends on the services what they are into, what they are trying to render you. If they're going to have access to the the EPHI data or the PHI data, and if they are storing it or if they are storing it from their network or from their their premises or from their servers, etc., then they are definitely to be in compliance with the HIPAA rule, and all of the whatever I spoke about, they also need to be compliant with.
Karthik, an extended question on this. In the context of business associate, we are using sub-processor. Actually, they are not accessing data, but we are pushing data. For example, SMS sent to the covered entity. So in that case, whether that sub-processor should be HIPAA compliant or having some business associate agreement is enough for risk assessment.
So one of the rule in HIPAA, Kudi, it says that if the SMSs are going to have some sort of the PHI data, and if those SMSs are going to be shared with your third party, or other third party is managing that entire SMS the portfolio for that matter. In that case, if they are the ones probably who is going to be helping with the SMS generation, right? And then they may have a tool, and then that tool may access the relevant data. In that case, to the extent of applicability, they are required to follow the specific rules of the HIPAA HITECH and the omnibus rule. If they are not storing any data, or if they're not accessing any data, only if you are sharing the data with them, right? Then you may require to go have an agreement on how they will protect the data that you are sharing with them. So that requires an agreement and NDA in place.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Karthik, just something I have a clarity here that I wanted to.
Yeah.
So when the SMS goes to the third party,
Yeah.
it's probably going to be a phone number or a content which will be shared, which may not have a PHI per se, like any information related to health. So from third party's perspective, it may not look like health information at all. So even in that case, if will we have to consider that third party as a subcontractor under HIPAA?
No,
Or-
that exactly I said. If you look into my the PHI, what do we call as a PHI, right? So I showed about some 14 or 15, the line items, correct? Now, I would recommend that, rather you taking a decision of, whether you need to protect or not protecting it, you have to go back and, check with your, the covered entity. So for example, to answer your question, if it does not cover any health record, right? But rather assuming if I'm a patient of, a covered entity, right? Or a customer of a covered entity, and I have my mobile number, I have my name provided to you. So from, the regulatory lens, even those two becomes my PHI data. Okay. Now, it may not have a health information, but becomes more like, the PIA data, right? So thereby, whether do you want to protect that because it does not have any health information, becomes like the personally identified information, then do I also require to ensure they get compliant completely with HIPAA? That's a question, correct? So to me, the answer is you don't need to get compliant with all of the rules of the HIPAA, but he still has access to the PII data. But I think it's worthwhile that you discuss with your security officer on the covered entity side and then take their views also, because it is all depends on what security control that they want to be in place from another regulatory standpoint as well. That is what, that will be more recommended practice.
Okay, so the minimum thing that we should be able to do is to inform the covered entity and
Correct. And take the
see if
issue,
they have any comments on that.
Correct. That will be a very first step that you have to do. But in general, if he has an access to PII data, in that case, certain security controls will have to be applied in terms of, he does not share the data to anyone. And while he looks into data and then he erases it if it is not required. And thereby he provides, the audit log of such data to you on a periodical basis. So some security, provisions as part of the HIPAA rule will be more applicable to you, and the privacy part as well.
Okay, okay. Even for PIA, these controls are applicable under HIPAA.
Yeah, PIA will be applicable. Yeah, PIA will be applicable. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and one more question, Karthik.
Yeah.
So I see, like, my understanding is that the privacy rule is specifically clear about, let's say, which provision of the privacy rule applies to which entity. Is it covered? Like, let's say, the obligation of a covered entity are so and so things, and these are the obligations of business associates. So in privacy rule, but then when I see security rule, it says both all these obligations apply to business associate and covered entity. So when we are, let's say, negotiating with our customers who are covered entities, and our customers are trying to ensure that we have enough security controls in place. Now, we have to, from our perspective as a business associate, we have to ensure compliance with security rule. From customers' perspective also, they have to ensure compliance with security rule. And from what you are saying, it's covered entity will have to ensure that security rule is complied with properly, even if business associate has an obligation under HIPAA directly. So let's, in case of a disagreement between covered entity and business associate in respect of a particular control, that this is something you are supposed to be responsible for and not me. Let's say one of the parties says that. Is there any guidance in HIPAA about that? Like who should be responsible for which, let's say, particular control? Because that data resides in your hand, you are responsible for that. Like,
No,
is there any guidance like that on?
Yeah, it's a very good thought that you had in your mind. So the point is, the security rule also gets applied to the covered entity for the reason, not, all of it gets outsourced. There are certain, Yep, sorry, I'm back. Am I audible now? Sorry, I think there was some Wi-Fi issue. Thank you. So I don't know where I got lost, but let me quickly repeat it again. So the point what I was trying to say is that the security rule of HIPAA clearly outlines, irrespective of a covered entity or a business associates, they need to put all of these security controls in place. For example, my covered entity may have developed their own application and they can store the data on their own server within their own premises, or they can also use a third party, using their product. So irrespective of it, it is not about who is going to use what, right? End of the day, whosoever is going to develop a product and they're going to store the data in the cloud or on the server, etc., they need to follow the security control. What you need to get a buy-in from your covered entity is that now this HIPAA rule, will be applicable for A or BC product, because I'm providing services for A and BC product to you. And thereby the data will get stored in so and so, the cloud or on the data center. And I'm using a third party to minimum level who has access to so and so data, or rather, he gets access to the server, and then he is getting compliant with ABC, a section of the security and privacy rule. So is it good enough? Right? And this is what you need to agree with your covered entity.
Okay. So let me, based on your answer, let me try to get further clarity, like contextually. Let's say there's a software that a service provider is providing to a customer, and the customer stores PHI in that software in cloud, and the storage of that information is the service provider has taken provided a lot of security controls for that, like for example encryption and all of that. But then in terms of the features in the product, it's not exactly privacy friendly, as in any user of that software can disclose that information to anyone else. So in terms of user having access to, let's say, there is no privileged kind of control that the software feature provides. So that's, since the software does not provide that feature, it's left to the covered entity to ensure that the admin of that software ensures proper control over, not the admin, the entire covered entity ensures that all the employees of the covered entity ensure that this PHI is not disclosed to anyone to whom this is not supposed to be disclosed. So is this feature something that business associate is supposed to take care under HIPAA, or covered entity is supposed to? Like,
no,
there is a disagreement.
If you refer to my third or fourth slide, there's one specific requirement on the HIPAA that you have to perform, a covered entity should perform a risk assessment. And that should be on an ongoing basis. The same risk assessment should also be done by the BA as well, right? Now, what the risk assessment say, does not talk about, okay, this is not there, straight away, it goes to non-count. It is not that way. Assuming a feature is not there, you will have to identify the other steps through which you can mitigate that particular risk, what HIPAA law is trying to bring forth. So HIPAA law does not say, have this feature, do this, do that. HIPAA law gives a basic principle that, do not disclose the data to any third party. If you're going to share the data third party, ensure the relevant disclosure are being protected, right? Now, how do you protect it? Through various mechanisms. So what I'm trying to say is that a feature is available or not, irrespective of it, a risk assessment is required to be performed by the covered entity and by the BA. And you need to consult with your covered entity if this is not there. Now, how else do we address the risk of this? And there you have to probably implement the other mechanisms to prevent that particular risk of that.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Karthik.
So Praveen has one question. I'll answer them and go to slides because they are to finish HIPAA itself and they have only 30 minutes left. Can we think of it that anyone handling, accessing, storing PHI labeled data automatically comes under HIPAA? Can you repeat this question, Praveena? Maybe you can unmute yourself. I'm not able to understand. Typically, anybody who's accessing, handling, or storing data will come under the HIPAA compliant as a BA. Am I reading a question correct, or am I not? I'm missing something.
I've asked her to unmute.
Okay. Before that, I take another question. HIPAA compliance fully implemented in India. What penalty is case of? Okay. Mohammed Shah Ahmed. To answer the question, the answer is no. To me, it is no. But other, the leaders may differ with that. To me, the answer is no. There is no. It is not about the India or Australia or anyone. It depends upon the business associate or an entity in specific who's under the question. But as I said, India is trying to bring out a model where everybody will have a medical record, and thereby I think India will formulate similar to something like a HIPAA, and I think basis which India may push all the hospitals and the companies to be completely compliant with it, and then pose a penalty. But we can wait for that. But to answer the question, it's not about India or X or YZ region. It's about individual organization. Very good question. Yeah. Okay, so Krishna and Pravina, maybe okay. Pravina said her query has been answered. How mandates in regards to training is more to create awareness. They don't push that. So every BAs or every person who is part of the processing or store into the data or using the particular product. Yeah. So awareness is very much emphasized as part of the HIPAA, that they require awareness and training to be formally performed, and HIPAA really mandates that a proper awareness and training is being conducted by both at the covered entity as well as at the BA entity as well.
My question actually basically is there any frequency mentioned? Is one-time training if sufficient?
It's ongoing. It's ongoing. As and when there's a changes in the rule, it is required to be also communicated. Because anybody who gets into the team new joinee, they are required to have this training completed before they get into the specific of the business processing or a transaction level processing. They need to understand and get the training compliant with. That's the best practices.
Right. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to quickly on the next topic, Satish. Okay, now on the SOC2 and basics of SOC2 Plus. Satish, you may quickly want to give some background on the SOC. So Satish is my colleague, who works with me on most of my the SOC and HIPAA as well. So Satish will give a quick overview on the SOC, and then I'll add to it as it comes. Yeah.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. So to give a brief history of SOC, SOC typically started sometime in 1992. Its early days, it was initially called as SAS-70, and it's issued by the AACPA. And with all the changes that happened over the internal control over financial reporting in the late part of 90s, it led to the implementation of Sarbanes-Oxley Act in 2002. So that's when the impact and the need of SAS-70 was more understood. So SAS-70 became more prevalent, and whenever people talk about an internal control, SAS-70 kind of came into much prominence, and SAS-70 was widely recognized, and people started looking more into SAS-17 for all their operations and business processes where services of an outsourced service provider has been used. And with passage of time, there's so many advancements which came in, and in 2010, a need for another standard which crept in for the UK region, typically, which led to ISA 3402. And ISA 3402 is issued by the IASB. And AACPA also, with considering all the technological changes, the changes in the business environment and geopolitical changes, kind of replaced SAS-70 with a updated standard called SSAE 16. So typically, there were two standards which kind of spoke about the internal control over financial reporting. So entities which were located predominantly in UK kind of resorted to ISA 3402. That's been governed by the IASB. And the institutions across the other places, most predominantly US and other countries, started using SAA 16 as mandated by AACPA. So from 2011, any period that started after 2011 June, service auditors who audit and report on the service organizations, or typically the service organizations which carry out the outsourced service functionalities of service providers, has to mandatorily either adhere to a SSA 16 or an ISA 3402 certifications. With passage of time, there are a lot of advancements took place, and in 2017, there came another change, typically by mid-2017, wherein the SSAE 16 got replaced by SSAE 18. So SSAE 18 got more prevalent, and in SSAE 18, with 2018 December, the SSAE 18's trust service criteria mapping also led way to the trust service criteria. DEC mappings. So currently, as we talk, SA18 typically has two kinds of reports that's prevalently issued. One is SOC1 and the other is SOC2. So SOC1 typically covers all the business processes and the process controls that have a direct impact on the internal control or financial reporting of the service, of the service organization with respect to the user entities. And there is another kind of report, SOC2, which predominantly talks about the data, the operations, the security aspects, the compliance aspect, etc., for the entire business end-to-end from a service organization standpoint. And SOC was becoming more prevalent, and also with the growing advent of technology and the growing requirement of statutory requirements and other compliance requirements, there is much broader reliance that's being placed on third-party assurance reporting, such as SOC 1, SOC 2, etc. So that led to the next rung of reports called SOC 2 Plus, wherein SOC 2 is we give a SOC 2 report with an underlying criteria, which is again mandated by HITRUST or HIPAA or CSA, etc. So these reports are kind of predominantly accepted by most of the regulatory and statutory authorities, let that be the SEC, the PCAOB, etc. And from a professional standpoint, typically SOC 1, there are various basic guides that we follow when we issue a SOC reporting. So typically from a SOC 1 standpoint, the guidance note that we issue are ATC 105, ATC 205, and ATC 320 guidance. These guidances give step-by-step inputs on what needs to be considered when we are issuing a SOC 1 report in terms of the material misstatements, in terms of what we have to consider when in terms of our reporting functionalities, in terms of the content as to what goes in, and when we talk to the management about what assertion they give, what are the various points that needs to be considered and kept in mind while evaluating the internal control effectiveness from a service auditor standpoint. From a SOC 2 perspective, these guidance get covered under ATC 105 and ATC 205. These guidances kind of give all the necessary inputs with respect to the compliance and operations related to specific trust service criteria. Probably we'll come to the trust service criteria in a bit in the next slide. And ISA 3402 or ISA 3000 standards are the reports which are prepared in accordance with the IASB standards. And of late, with more startups coming in and more entities wanting to know about their current level as to where they stand, AUP reporting is also getting prevalent. So AUP reporting has a requirement under, as a guidance note under ATC 215, which typically talks about the procedures that need to be considered on reporting for performing an agreed upon procedures reporting. In addition to the SOC 1, SOC 2, or ISA 342 or ISA 3000 reports, there is also a recent development wherein since 2019, late 2019, there is a SSA 19 standard which has come up. SSA 19 predominantly talk about the attestation standards for the agreed upon procedures engagement, and it kind of supersedes the earlier statutes given under that standard. And SSA 19 gives a lot of flexibility in terms of what needs to be done by removing the requirement of getting assertions from third parties, by permitting the practitioner to issue a general use report, and it no longer requires the users to take responsibility of sufficient of procedures. And also it allowed procedures to be developed over the course of the engagement, because the initial understanding could be something, and as we go along and perform the procedure, there may be some additional aspects, there may be some new assistance record which may be captured in when performing the procedures. And for all agreed upon procedures reporting under SSA 19, the mandated date is last year, July 2021. And after that, though early implementation permitted, currently as we talk, it's already mandated and is in place. So typically when we talk about third-party reporting options.
Just to add a point, while we speak about the AICPA, there's also the equivalent standard in other countries, which is nothing but the ISA 3402. Let's go back to this slide. So while we talk about a SOC 2, which is the theme for today, the equivalent standard in the other countries other than US is about ISA 3000. Just a couple of lines on ISA 3000. For example, you may have GDPR, right? So GDPR has the data controller and the data processor section. So while you wanted to, be a data processor, in case if you want to provide an audit report, then you can use ISA 3000 section through which you would be able to assess the controls around the data processor, and then you can issue an audit opinion report around that. While SOC 2 Plus, it has a specific teams like security. We talk about it. There are 5 teams around it: security, confidentiality, privacy, integrity, and availability. But ISAE 3000 is quite open. It all that it tells you is you can take any framework, or you can take any subject matter, and then in case if you want to provide an opinion audit report on that, you can use ISAE 3000 format, through which you will be able to issue that. That's a big difference between SOC 2 Plus and ISAE. Assuming you have a customer in Europe and you want to provide a report on the the Cloud Security Alliance, CSA framework, then you can use ISAE 3000 section, basis which you can provide a report or a GDPR or on HIPAA. While you have a customer in US and if they want to get an audit report on a HIPAA, then you can go for a SOC 2 Plus HIPAA report or a HITRUST certification, which is in the next topic. Yeah, back to you, Satish.
Thanks, Karthik. So probably this slide is what Karthik already said in detail. So typically when we talk about a TPA reporting option, third-party assurance reporting options, we talk about a SOC 1 or a SOC 2 or a SOC 2 Plus, ISA 3000, ISA 3402, and SOC 3. So SOC 1, SOC 2, as Karthik just explained. So SOC 1 talks about ICFR, Internal Control of Financial Reporting, and it is mandated or governed by AICPA. And SOC 2 talks about data security and operations, and again it's mandated by AICPA. The corresponding standards as issued by the IASB are ISA 3402 and ISA 3000. So incidentally, the others piece which becomes more prevalent these days, because SOC 2 report talks about the data and security from a AICPA standpoint, but with growing amount of frameworks and a lot of legislational purview coming in, then comes a need for additional subject matter or additional criteria as well. That's where SOC 2 Plus come into play. So SOC 2 Plus is something where you have a report under AICPA, and then you add a layer of an ISO 27001 or a NAST or a HIPAA or a HITRUST with a SOC 2 report, wherein the basic trust service criteria would be covered or governed under AICPA, and there will be an applicable trust service criteria, which would be the additional matter in terms of a GDPR or a ISO or a NIST or a HIPAA. So typically that's where SOC 2 Plus comes into play. And all these reports are restricted reports, meaning these reports are consumed by a specific and targeted individuals or targeted parties. They are used by the service organization, the user organization, the service auditors and the user auditors, and key business partners. So, but the SOC 3 report is a general public general utility report, wherein it is given to the larger forum at stake. So if organizations are certified at SOC 3, then that's something that they can roll out to others. The only difference being the other reports on SOC 3 is that the other reports will have a very detailed representation in terms of the auditor's multiple sections, which covers the auditor's opinion, the management assertion, the services covered by the service organization, the auditor's test procedures, the control activities, the test procedures performed by the auditor, and the results, etc., along with the opinion. Whereas from a SOC 3 perspective, it will not be that level detailed, but it'll talk about the auditor's opinion, the management's assertion, and it stops the process at a very high level to ensure that the overall governance, the overall internal control environment, and related aspects are covered in that report. Then coming back to SOC 2. So what is SOC 2 report? We are hearing this term SOC 2. What is that SOC 2 report? So the SOC 2 report is a report on controls of the service organization that is relevant to one of the 5 trust service criteria. So the 5 trust service criteria, or the 5 basic trust service principles that are mandated are: 1, security. Security, where we talk about the information systems being protected against unauthorized access, how we are securing the systems, how unauthorized access is prohibited, how unauthorized disclosure is stopped, how damage to systems, etc., is done. So basic security measures that are treated against the data from unauthorized access. So security. The next trust service criteria is availability, which talks about how the data is available for operations and how it is used to meet the entity's overall objectives. The third trust service criteria is processing integrity. How the systems process processing integrity talks about how the systems process the data and how the processing is complete, how it is valid, how timely and how accurate are we processing the data, and how are these helping in enabling the entity to achieve its objective. And the fourth criteria is confidentiality, where the data protection in terms of delineation of confidential information, in terms of ensuring that only the information is shared on a need-to-know basis, etc. So what are the various measures that the organization takes place to ensure that confidentiality of data is maintained to meet the entity's objectives. And the last criteria, the fifth criteria is privacy. How the personal information is collected, how the organization is using that, how it is retained, how it is disposed, how it is disclosed, etc., to meet the entity's objectives. So these are the 5 trust service criteria that are there from a SOC 2 perspective. Of these, security is a mandated trust service criteria, meaning security should be there in a SOC 2 report. So should I have all the 5 trust service criteria in a SOC 2 report? The answer is no. We can have any one or more of these trust service criteria, of which security is the mandated trust service criteria. As regards to others, depending upon the nature of operations, the agreement between the service organization and the user organizations, the necessity of the service organization, the way the internal control structure is developed, the way the control environment is, the way the requirements are from the customers, prospective customers, etc. We can have a SOC 2 report issued for security plus one or more of the additional trust service criteria being availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy.
So there is one question. So can the okay, so I can so there's one point question asked in terms of, can SOC 2 reports be used for checking or readiness for the data protection bill as it when it is implemented? A very good question again. So I'm not sure how many of you would have actually gone through the data protection bill, which is going to be approved by the parliament. So data protection bill has 2 to 3 key aspects. One aspect is that they insist that if any companies are going to use application, or they're going to use a mobile app, or they're going to use a product, and that should be completely secured. While there should be adequate security controls, and there should be a technological standard document that will guide the security around that application. And while the data also gets stored, it also insisted that the data should be secure, and the data security should be in place, and the privacy of the data should be ensured. So while you're using a third party who provides you an application or a product, and while he also maintains your the data, right? From the data protection standpoint of view, the bill standpoint of view, they also mandate a periodical assessment to be performed on that, the technical security aspects of the product, and also the data security as well. They also bring an audit log also into the picture. So that is where the SOC 2 will predominantly be of a greater use, which will help you to check with look into the controls what the third party has in place while they're providing you the services around the IT through application or a product or an infrastructure or the network. So this software will be a very good tool that you can probably check with your third parties or who can provide you the report, so which you can understand the internal control of the organization around the security, privacy part of it, integrity part of it, the availability part of it, etc. Yeah. Back to you, Satish.
Thanks, Karthik. Okay. So we just spoke about this slide a little bit earlier. So with SOC 2 reports, the audit service providers kind of issue a report on the various aspects of the control elements with respect to the internal controls pertaining to security, availability, trust service criteria, security, availability, confidentiality, privacy, and processing integrity. But with a lot of frameworks coming into place, and with a lot of industry standards that are coming into place, where there are specific requirements for organizations to be adhered to certain specific standards. So considering all that, SOC 2 Plus is an additional layer wherein along with SOC 2, we can have additional requirement like HITRUST or HIPAA or Cloud Security Alliance, etc. So that's what we spoke about. So what happens is the ACPA has collated with all these various institutions. For example, ACPA has given specific mapping considerations to be considered for issuing a SOC 2 report when the additional matter is HIPAA, for issuing a SOC 2 report when the additional matter is CSA, for a SOC 2 report when the additional matter is ISO 27001, for a SOC 2 report and the additional matters NIST, etc. So all these mapping considerations have been given by ACPA already. So typically from a SOC 2 standpoint, if we take it at a standalone, ACPA has given a detailed mandate on what needs to be considered, the various points of focus which we need to consider for each of the trust service criteria and for each of the trust service principles under each criteria. So when you talk about security, what are the various criteria that needs to be considered under security trust service criteria? What are the various principles with respect to the multiple domains that are covered? So under each domain or each criteria, what are the various points of focus which needs to be considered when the auditors kind of audit and report on the internal controls? So that is already given by ACPA. In addition to giving that point of focus and the mapping for SOC 2, with advent of all these new legislations, ACPA has also come up with detailed framework on how do we map a SOC 2 plus HIPAA, how do we map a SOC 2 plus NIST, etc. So whenever we kind of talk to clients, we can talk about these, and when we are performing the audits also, that comes in a great help in terms of understanding the environment. It also helps us to prepare for the questions that we can ask the clients when performing the audit.
Yeah, so just to add a couple of points here. I mean, you can go to next slide, Satish. Go to next slide. Yeah, the next slide, rather. Yeah. Okay, see the key benefits of SOC 2 plus is that SOC 2 plus SOC 2, it's by itself, the elements of SOC 2, as Satish said, we have security, we have confidentiality, we have availability, privacy, and integrity. Now you take HIPAA. Let's talk about HIPAA for today. While you look into the HIPAA, you have something called the administrative safeguard, we have physical safeguard, we have technical safeguard. Well, administrative safeguard, we'll talk about more in terms of the access controls part of it, and what are the policy procedures in place in terms of security of the application, and also secure the data. While physical, we'll also talk about the physical security of the controls and the data center and the workstation. While the technological safeguard, we'll talk about encryption, we'll talk about the data masking, we'll talk about the audit log. So the theme between the HIPAA and the SOC 2 element are predominantly overlapping, right? Plus, the HIPAA has additional elements like the breach notification. It also has the elements of the penalty part of it, which we'll talk about when I brought a comparison between these two for you to make it for readers to really understand what you're trying to relate a SOC 2 plus a HIPAA. The SOC 2 plus HIPAA is something which many industries are really not aware. For example, they don't know that there's something called a SOC 2 plus HIPAA. But the reason is that SOC 2 plus SOC 2 and the HIPAA both has a lot of common theme together. So through which you can provide a comfort to your customer that the principles around the framework, like for example, the security piece, which is being spoken within the framework. And then we talk about a privacy, right? So within HIPAA, we have a privacy section. So the privacy section of the framework within HIPAA, right, which is being mapped to the SOC 2 privacy criteria. Okay. Now, same way, for example, HIPAA has something called a security rule. It spoke about policy procedures, right? Those specific rules under HIPAA that relates to the policies and procedure under the security rule is being mapped to the AICPA SOC 2 security criteria. So thereby, through this tool, you will be able to give a comfort to an independent audit assessment, through which you'll be able to give a comfort to your customer that these elements that we spoke about, security, confidentiality, integrity, availability, and privacy, these elements within the HIPAA rule that I'm compliant of or not compliant. That is what the report finally will contain. Now, this can be done for PCI DSS. Now, this can be done on NIST. This can be done on CSA. This can be done on the CI framework. So this can be done for any framework, as long as the framework has relevant features of security, privacy, confidentiality, or the availability aspect of it, or those aspects you can definitely will be able to address through a SOC 2. Now the answer is Is SOC 2 plus HIPAA or HIPAA gap assessment, are both of them the same? The answer is no, because HIPAA still has certain extensions like the breach notification, which also gets covered as part of the privacy. But then the violations, and also it talks about, the details in terms of the penalty part of it. Such controls, very, very limited, about 10%. It talks about breach notification and the penalty part of it, or violations that may not get covered as part of SOC 2. But still, the SOC 2 will cover in terms of the privacy breach notifications as well. So the benefits of SOC 2, one is you have a detailed reporting in terms of against a specific framework, eliminating the need for redundant activities and multiple records. For example, you may have HIPAA, you may do an IST, you may do an ISO, right? You don't need to provide 3 different reports to your customer. Rather, you can provide one report that tells you SOC 2 plus HIPAA plus CSA plus ISO, because all of it has a relevant theme. And that report can be provided to your customer, which you can probably take a cognizant of, reliance of. Standardized formatting for others issued by AICP and the ISAB board. Highly flexible tool that can incorporate multiple frameworks and industry standard. Demonstrate the controls in place to the organization, other stakeholders, and create substantial efficiencies. While you're looking into multiple report, you will be able to clearly articulate the commonality between all the framework, through which you'll be able to easily build the efficiencies and build a better control structure in the place. Yeah, back to you, Satish.
Yeah, thanks, Karthik. So these are the benefits which Karthik has explained just now. So I guess this is also a slide which Karthik has covered at a high level. So whenever we talk about a benefit of a SOC 2 plus HIPAA from a various standpoints. So, for example, if you talk about a health plan or a health provider, then the SOC 2 plus HIPAA report will give a comfort to both the management or the board. It provides assurance to the customers. It provides assurance to the regulators. It reduces the repeat audit request, because once you audit, you have both SOC 2 and HIPAA HIPAA certificate at the same point in time, and you also obtain assurance that the data that is being maintained by the organization is secure, the necessary privacy considerations are being considered, the privacy aspects are looked into, and even from a potential service provider perspective, what are the internal controls that are there, whether everything is aligned with what they need, etc. So all these can be obtained. Or when we talk about a manager, or when we talk about a third-party administrator, or a hosted service provider, or a cloud provider, etc. These SOC 2 plus reports kind of give varied benefits in terms of giving comfort, in terms of providing assurance to the customers, to the regulators, and also the most important from an audit standpoint, both from the entity and from the auditors, the repeat audit requests can be reduced, because these are like test ones used for the multiple things at the same point in time kind of reports. And most importantly, from the client perspective, if you look at it, the benefits are that it gives a very high level of confidence and comfort to the management, and it is giving an assurance to the client or that the data is secure. With the lot of happenings around the privacy and other considerations, how secure the data is, how the privacy aspects are considered, etc. And most importantly, how their overall internal control governance is. So all these assurance may be given. And from a regulator perspective, the overall internal control governance of the regulated entities can be tracked, can be assessed, because against each control, they'll be able to track where they stand at control level, at environment level, and at industry level. And also it helps them to reduce multiple requests for multiple statutes, and they have a consolidated report for SOC 2 plus HIPAA, or SOC 2 plus HITRUST, or SOC 2 plus INVEST, etc.
Samuel pitching here. Yeah, so this is SOC 2 plus HIPAA comparison. This is very, very, very relevant slide for all the audience and participants that we have today. Why should I do SOC 2 plus HIPAA? What is the relevance of HIPAA? How does it stack up against SOC 2, right? Now, whether you're subject to HIPAA regulation or being asked for a SOC 2 or ISO, right? The complaints can be complex, lengthy process for any company. But what happens when you have 2 or more frameworks is that you need to prove the compliance for when you need a SOC 2 for a corporate customers or a HIPAA compliance for your healthcare customers, right? So ISO 27000 for EU customer, or a SOC 2 for the US. The answer is a SOC 2 plus report. SOC 2 plus is an audit that includes both SOC 2 and another framework such as HITRUST or a HIPAA. So your auditor will do a SOC audit as usual, but will expand their controls to cover the second framework, as we spoke in the earlier. So HIPAA and SOC 2 have some overlapping control, but adding HIPAA to a SOC 2 audit also adds some new elements for the auditor to do list. Most notably, this includes breach notification and expanded attestation requirements. The benefits for bundling SOC 2 and HIPAA is that auditing both together will likely be faster than auditing for both separately. The drawback is the two frameworks are obviously going to do a bit slower than just once. You need to provide more audience to the auditor. The auditor will have more controls to check, right? But then both will stack up. Good extent, Hari Satish. So this is where it gives you a comparison between SOC 2 plus HIPAA. Now these are some of the common themes I would like to bring out. SOC 2 plus HIPAA, the both talks about encryption of data and the rest. SOC 2 plus HIPAA also talks about password policy and enforcement of the password policy. SOC 2 plus HIPAA also speaks about data risk assessment report. SOC 2 plus HIPAA also talks about code of conduct and ethics reviews. So with this slide, I think you'll be able to understand there are quite a lot of commonalities between SOC 2 requirement and the HIPAA requirement. So while you're using the SOC 2 plus HIPAA report, so this particular tool, you are able to address all the commonalities together, and rather doing it twice, you are able to do it once, and then through which you are able to achieve, or rather give comfort to your customer and thereby to their end customers. Right? I'll pause for a few seconds here, but any questions on this? Maybe I think we'll take the question at the end. So now I think there are a couple of questions by Narayan also. Can I take this question at the end if you don't mind, so that we'll finish up the HITRUST also. It's again a lengthy subject. We can take all the questions in the end. Yeah. I hope that's okay with everyone, right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you. Next slide, Satisha. We can skip this at the moment. I think we spoke about in this length. Yeah. Okay, we can stop here. So the key difference between HIPAA and a HITRUST, I know I really want to bring this clarity to all the user, because everybody thinks if I talk about HITRUST is a healthcare, HIPAA healthcare. What is different between HIPAA and a HITRUST becomes a question that everybody will have. But the answer is strictly no. HITRUST is not only a healthcare framework. HITRUST is a framework. It's a combination of multiple frameworks that we have in the global today. It's a combination of multiple frameworks. It addresses almost predominantly all the risks that the organization may have. It may address HIPAA. It can also address the NIST. It can also address CSA as well. So the answer is HITRUST is a framework, while HIPAA is a law, right? So HIPAA is to ensure that covered entities protect PHI and notify individual if their information is breached. HITRUST provides an organization a comprehensive risk management framework and a compliance framework program to provide an integrated approach. And HIPAA oversees privacy security of the PHI data, while HITRUST is a combination of multiple frameworks: HIPAA, PCI DSS, GDPR, and many more. And HIPAA, if your organization is a covered entity or a BA or a covered entity of a covered entity, then it must be compliant. Failure to do so could result in hefty fines and irreparable damages. By being in HITRUST compliant, an organization can definitely prove it has met some HIPAA mandated requirements. So thereby, it is not a mandate that you have to be a HITRUST compliant, but it is better that you are HITRUST compliant. Thereby, you have all the better controls in place. If you violate HIPAA, per violation is about $100. For a HITRUST, about $100 to $50,000, and for more per violation. Yeah. Next slide. And again, I want to make it very clear: if I'm HITRUST compliant, am I HIPAA compliant? That's a very obvious question. The answer is no. HITRUST will address some of the HIPAA requirements, right? But why should I go for a HITRUST? Through HITRUST, you'll be able to address many frameworks together. It's a very elaborative framework, through which you'll be able to have better way of managing the risk and having better controls in the place. Whereas HIPAA talks only from a healthcare perspective, right? Yeah. Next slide. Okay, quickly on what is HITRUST. So HITRUST was founded in 2007. It's an organization focused on security, privacy, and the risk management. It developed the HITRUST CSF to provide organizations with a comprehensive security and privacy program designed to manage data, compliance, and risk. It has become the most widely adopted security and privacy framework across industries globally. By certifying against the HITRUST CSF, organization can demonstrate compliance with the framework to anyone who needs a reassurance from the healthcare providers, hospitals, insurance companies, to any other organization needing the assurances. HITRUST is that it has mapped to different framework, as I said, NIST, ISO, HIPAA. Being in compliance with HITRUST CSF framework helps you to be in compliance with all these other framework and regulations, helping you cut down on the overall amount of time and effort that your organization has to spend annually on compliance. The organizations comply with HIPAA or any other regulatory requirement by performing a single assessment. Next slide. Why HITRUST matters? HITRUST matters because it helps you to manage risk, reduces the chance of a data breach, and prove to outside parties that you take security and compliance seriously. HITRUST has 19 domains that gets addressed when you undergo a HITRUST CSF certification. These domains cover a huge range of security and privacy concerns. And some of the examples why HITRUST should be required is a very good point that you may want to take a note of. HITRUST wants to make sure that your organization is doing things like securing mobile devices, releasing patches to prevent hackers from exposing a vulnerability and gaining access to your system, reviewing the security program of your vendor to ensure the data is in the safe hand, restricting who has elevated privileges to your network. It wants to ensure you have business continuity, disaster recovery, and breach response plan. These are some of the examples why you may want to have a HITRUST which covers all of these areas as well. Yeah, next slide. So I think we spoke about it. HITRUST is being utilized by 81% of the US hospitals and health system and 83% of US health plan. HITRUST CSF is the most widely adopted control framework in the healthcare industry. Typical notion is everybody feels having the HITRUST will help only the healthcare industry. The answer is no. HITRUST can also be used predominantly by the other industries as well. Okay? Yeah. Over 20 standards and frameworks are incorporated in the HITRUST framework. You can refer the last point. There are 20 standards and framework are being incorporated into the HITRUST. Yeah. Next slide. So there are two features to it. One is the current state assessment, and then we have something called I1 and R2. I1 is valid only for 1 year, and R2 is for the 2 years. While there are 2 years, what R2 suggests is that you do an interim assessment on an annual basis until 2 years. Post is again you have to do an assessment and submit your result to the HITRUST body, and thereby they provide a certificate to you. So what are the I1 features? If you look into it, what is a moderate level of effort and assurance? 219 preset controls that are required to be evaluated, and there are there are 3 maturity level implemented, and then you also have something to do with the implemented, and you also have to look for the process. You also have to look for the optional as well. So while I1 predominantly talks about the implemented part of that, and when you look into R2, it talks about the flexible controls being allowed, and you also talk about the policies, procedures, and implemented implementation of that. So as I said, there are 3 parts: implemented, measured, and managed. While I1 focus only on the implementation part, while R2 also focuses on the implementation part, measured part, also the managed part of part of it. And then it also covers NIST, HIPAA, FedRAMP, NIST, AICPA, TSCs, PCI DSS, GDPR, and other more. 2-year certification. R2 requires an interim and a bridge assessment also available. Yeah. Predominantly, many companies go with R2. It's not an R1, I1. They go with R2, especially because it covers about 2,000 odd controls. It's very comprehensive, and it also requires all the 3 stages like implemented, measured, and managed to be included as part of the scope. And it also covers all frameworks, and it gives you a very good the risk framework that you can ensure that you can implement in your organization. Yeah, next slide. I'll skip this definition as of now, but one thing you may want to know, there's something called CSF SSR, who only can do this particular the assessment, and while you have a certification body who will give a HITRUST certification to you, so you probably need to have that in your mind. An entity that is an authorized license of the HITRUST CSF is only can do this particular exercise. Yeah, next slide. So HITRUST has about 14 control categories, 49 control objectives, 156 controls, up to 3 implementation levels for each control, approximately 1,800 requirement statements spread over each implementation level. This is the extent of the HITRUST part of it. Next slide. I think we spoke about it. Yeah. So a good scoring basis is not for a SOC2 plus, but this is more for a HITRUST certification. A policy requires takes 15 points. A process or a procedure takes 20 points. Implemented part takes 40 points. Measured takes 10 points, and measured managed takes 15 points. So this is the way the points are being scored. Basis your HITRUST framework, this is how the points get scored. But you don't need to be really bothered about it. As an assessor, will be able to guide you what is really required from a scoring standpoint of view for you to get compliant, also get a certificate from the HITRUST body. These are the 14 control categories that we have in HITRUST. Security management program, access control, resource security, risk management, security policy, compliance, asset management, physical environment security, communications, system acquisition, development and maintenance, system incident management, PCM, privacy practice. So if you see this, all of it is being covered under your, the SOC2 plus as SOC2 DSP as well. Now you look at the HIPAA, all of this also comes under HIPAA as well. That is the commonality between the theme that gets covered in various framework. And that is why, through a SOC2, you will be able to provide a SOC2 plus framework report. While you can also save a good amount of costing around that, but SOC2 plus HITRUST is also a very good tool. So which you'll be able to give a comfort how these particular, the domains or, the rules are being, implemented by the organization, and how they can take a reliance on these control aspects that are being listed as part of the HITRUST framework as well. Now we are jumping into the key security control section around API and cloud. While we talk about on the cloud, the data is no longer confined to traditional perimeters, so nobody knows where the data exactly is being stored. The business objectives of next generation technology requires increased data flexibility. For example, IoT, AI, RPA. While using a lot of these, it requires a lot of data flexibility to be accessed upon. Data continues to grow at an exceptional rate and will become a kind of gold mining, right? So that's what they term it as. Regulatory requirements and scrutiny around rise. By 2024, more than 80% of the organization globally will face modern data protection compliance requirements that are becoming increasingly more specific and stringent. Cyber criminals also increasing, targeting data due to its value. 41% of breach include personal information, costing organization average of $161 per record. That's a huge amount, and it's also increasing on day-to-day basis. The dark web outside, nobody knows who's doing what, so it requires a good amount of guarantee for you to ensure you mitigate the risk of that. And a quick overview in terms of what is private public clouds from a on-premise data center. Typical is data, application, OS, and infrastructure becomes the responsibility of the organization. On a public cloud, data and the application becomes the organizational responsibility, while the OS becomes the cloud service provider, and infrastructure also becomes the service provider responsibility. So the OS typically it becomes the organization also at times manages it, but typically when the cloud is when a provider gives you a cloud infra as a service, he will manage the OS at some cases. So you may want to be cognizant of that. Public cloud as a PaaS platform, data will be the organization responsibility. Application will be more like a share responsibility. OS and infra will become the service provider responsibility under a PaaS. When under a SaaS platform, data becomes the complete responsibility of the organization, while all of the rest becomes the responsibility of the service provider. That is the difference between IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, and on-premise data center. So this will give you an oversight in terms of who is managing the risk and who should probably have a better control in place to manage the risk of it, because you're outsourcing the risk to the relevant third party while you're using the IaaS or a PaaS or a SaaS platform. Yeah, next slide. So talking about our key cloud data is one is the data aggregation is risky.
while the access for hundreds of user and queries become difficult to manage. Data-centric control should be developed so that the strategic resource can be safely leveraged in terms of your VMS and all that stuff. Encryption boost compliance. Encryption will actually increasing a lot. There's specific requirement on encryption by itself, which is required to be looked at. I think that's going to be the trend in the upcoming years, where it will be start making the organizations to adhere on that. Protection from the cloud service providers and their customers. Redundancy benefits offered by the CSPs are made possible by copying the customer data to locations where they have no control. Hypervisor attack can occur when one customer account is compromised and the attacker moves horizontally to the other account. Risk reduction and brand protection database can result in the damage to the reputation of the organization and also the loss of the customer trust. The encryption helps avoid misuse of the data due to unauthorized access. Typically, anybody we ask to say we are encrypted, but there's a lot more to say that your encryption is being there, because you have to manage your encryption keys, the stricter the encryption algorithm, all of it has a cost factor involved, right? So why would an organization go and invest so much why they don't recover that from a client? That is where you need to figure out an alternative control to be in place, while you don't have a proper encryption and a key management systems in place. Next slide. So we have a huge cloud risk framework, which gives a holistic review of the cloud cyber security capabilities. I'll pause here for a while. Identity and access management required to be looked at. It also encompasses the cloud data protection, application and PaaS platform, cloud vigilance, cloud resilience, network and infrastructure. While all of these topics has its own risk framework built within that, and while that can give you a huge summary of the risk and controls, what you need to review and you need to put in place to ensure that you address all of these verticals. So it is a framework by itself, which gives you a complete overview about what an organization should look at, rather what an organization probably should refer to. It also refers to various industry standards like CSA, Cloud Control Matrix, NIST, ISO as well. Yeah, next slide. So talking about the API, so API has become very increasing today, because I don't think most of us have given some relevant importance on this, while we also have done audit. This has been kind of been neglected, I would say, but API becomes a source for many of the hackers to probably get in, because it gains access to your network or to your servers. They log into your servers. So some of the key controls that I would recommend is that the data and technical standards for the API should be developed, and the data must be provided or requested in accordance with the data standards issued by OBIE. To forget OBIE, it's again a European standard, but you should probably have a standard in place to which you build a security controls around that. Security capabilities and processes must be established to prevent brute force attacks on the API. Processes must be established to secure APIs from malicious attack. Where possible, the web application firewalls must be implemented to protect the APIs. And then processes must be established to detect fraudulent activities carried out through the API. Very, very key point. API messages must provide information such as IP address, user agent, customer device, through which you'll be able to track whether the traffic is legitimate or not. Well, again, one of the key points. Time duration limit must be given to access granted to third party to prevent unauthorized. That is again one of the major points, is that we always tend to give a standing access to third party, because the operation part is easier, right? You don't need to keep on disabling it, enabling it, disabling it, enabling it. So if you give access to them throughout, so your headache is being taken care. That is where the problem arises. So you should not give administrative access to your third party, to your API for a unlimited duration. You should provide access only for a specific time duration, and then the activity also should be logged and reviewed by the management. Tokens must be utilized to ensure that third party is acting within the bounds of the permissions granted. Again, another very key point. These are some of the key controls over API to be covered in any audit at the beginning, but there is a huge framework built by NIST on the API, while Indian government also emphasizes on the API framework. while I would request all of you guys to, refer to those framework and ensure and also do a review whether your API is being secured enough, and thereby you're able to prevent to some extent some attacks that are trying to probably come into your organization through API networks. Yeah, next slide. Some of the cloud security control, I'll pass here for a few seconds. You can probably quickly make a note of this. Yeah, next slide. Do we want to take over this, Satish?
Sir,
Yeah, you can take this slide. Yeah.
okay. So this complementary user entity controls are something whenever there is a service organization and user entity which are involved in the performance of a control. What happens is there is some portion of a control for which there may be a dependence on the user entity. So what happens is that portion of the activity which the user entity is responsible, we clearly call that out and say that these are the user entity considerations or these are complementary user entity controls. So what happens is for a control in a service organization to be effective, the user entity should perform their part as well so that the control becomes overall effective. Probably we'll just give a scenario which will explain this case better. So for an invoice data entry, scanned invoices are kind of received by the service organization in invoice capture application. These invoices are then processed through 4 queues, which are correction for legal entities, correction, and verification. So here what happens is for an invoice to be processed or invoice to be keyed in perfectly by the service organization, there is a dependency on the user entity to provide accurate and complete information. The information here is the invoices which are scanned and uploaded in the invoice capture application. So here, whenever we are testing the invoice capturing or invoice data entry control, we clearly call out that the responsibility of service organization is that of data capture or is that of invoice processing. However, it is the responsibility of the user entity to provide us with the complete set of invoices and also upload in the invoice capture application. So even in the report in this specific section where we talk about the process description, we clearly explain the process that is being followed by the service organization as regards the invoice data entry, and then there'll be a separate section which will call out the complementary user entity considerations, and there we will call out that the user organization is responsible for providing the accurate and complete set of invoices to the service organization. So that this way the responsibility of both the parties are clearly called out in the report, and in case for the service organization to have its control operated effectively, we should also have the user entity do their part as well effectively. So we clearly called out in the report, and these complementary user entity controls, these are again included in section 4 as well. When the auditor prepares the testing results for each control, we clearly call out if there is an inherent dependency for those controls with respect to user entity considerations, and that gets mapped at a control level before we arrive at a concluding, before we give our opinion on the specific control results. So there are a couple of other scenarios also. For example, a bank reconciliation, which is pretty common. So whenever a bank reconciliation is performed by a service organization, they kind of rely on multiple factors, such as differences called the breaks. So there could be some identified breaks and there could be some uninvestigated breaks. So whenever the differences are identified but are not resolved, then probably there is given back to the user entity for appropriate resolutions. So here we will clearly call out that the user entity is responsible for resolution of breaks, because as a service organization who is performing the reconciliation, the responsibility lies with the reconciliation of the open items. However, resolving the open items in terms of reaching out to the customers or whatever is the discrepancy, addressing that by taking it up with the banks or the customers or whatsoever is the case, will be the responsibility of the user entity, and they'll have to communicate to the service organization on what needs to be done in each scenario for each of the specific identified discrepancy. So the report, when we are issuing the report, it clearly calls out that from a bank reconciliation perspective, the service organization is responsible for identifying the differences and pointing it out to the user organization, whereas the user organization is responsible for resolution of the discrepancies identified, and also whenever the case, whether the AP system or to the bank system, the user organization will be responsible for providing access to the service organization. Another classic case would be the logical access management. So whenever a service organization performs any workstation configurations for the user entity, and access is granted by service organization to user entity or to the service organization associates, on a monthly basis, the service organization will perform a review of the associates who have access to the systems, and then they communicate to the if there are any issues identified, they communicate it to the user entity. So here we will clearly call out that the user entity is responsible for granting access and revoking access to the service organization's associates. Though the service organization associates work in the user entity's environment, VMware or whatever environment they have, the service organization is responsible for finding out if there are any discrepancies and informing it to the user entity as part of monthly user access review. But it is the overall responsibility of the user entity to ensure that the access are granted and revoked in a timely manner. And also, in case there is any discrepancy being noted in the review, the user entity would become responsible for taking corrective actions. So these responsibilities of working, what performance, what processing the service organization performs, and what role the user entity have at a control level for the performance of, let's say there are 10 tasks from a processing perspective. So access creation, the request for raising an access creation could be the responsibility of a service organization, but access provisioning will become responsibility of the user organization. We clearly call out at each stage whose responsibility is what, and this gets mapped in the report in section 3 and in section 4 as well. Karthik, I guess we come to the end of it.
Thank you, Satish. Yeah, I think we are at the end. We have 6 minutes more, so we can open for the Q&As. I already see some questions here. Let me try to responding one by one. The first question I think I missed out to answer is EPH data need to be read after 6 years or audit log? See, the EPHA data as per the omnibus rule, there's no specific year that they want to. The data can be for indefinite time, but the audit log is required to be retained in terms of whatever data that you collect or you store or you transmit. The audit log trail becomes a very key, which covers the user access logins, new user to systems, files accessed by all the user, all the changes made to the database, firewall logs, OS logs, anti-malware logs. Likewise, all of it are required to be retained for close to 6 years. That is the recommended one. That is also comes under the rule of 164.316, I believe. Yeah. Okay, that responds to your question. How does this fit for CCM4 and CAIQ? I need to come back, Mr. Narayanan, on that. I will check if CCM4 can be covered as part of this. But if you can give me your ID, I can check and I can write an email to you. Maybe Satish, you can make a note of this. I can check and revert on whether we can do SOC2 plus CCM4 or CAIQ. And then it is a client question from their European customer. Narayanan, can you explain on this question?
Yeah, hi, Narayanan here.
Right. Hi.
Yeah, it's related to that CIQ. It was Europe-based customer who had asked my client.
Okay.
So he wanted that, and he had also asked a second question, if I can ask that.
Sure.
How does this, the SOC2 integrate with GDPR requirements, and if a separate report has to be published by us for GDPR, or can the client, revert to his customer saying that we already audited under SOC2, that some kind of response.
Fantastic. So there are two ways that you can do that. You can definitely do it with SOC2 plus GDPR framework, or you can also do ISAE 3000 report framework.
that you can also do to assess the complete framework of GDPR. For example, if a GDPR, relates to security, confidentiality, privacy, and, the availability aspect, if there are something to do with, something which is not getting covered, for example, your penalty part of it, how the DPO will, if you look at GDPR compliant, they would say that, the respective org should have a DPO officer who has to audit and ensure that, all of these are in place, etc. So likewise, a specific aspect you feel you want to cover all the entire framework, you can still use ISA 3000 framework, through which you can provide opinion on the entire framework by itself. So to precisely put your to give a response to you, so SOC 2 Plus you can very much provide, or you can also provide through the ISA 3000 framework also.
So just a corollary to that, I mean, would you be able to assist in some kind of mapping in terms of these?
Yeah.
Yeah.
SOC 2 Plus GDPR mapping has already been available, basis which is what we perform the audit, and then we provide our opinion on that. While ISA 3000 is no mapping as such, we use a GDPR framework by itself, on which we'll do the audit and then we provide our opinion.
Okay, great. Okay, I'll revert to you offline then. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks, Narayana. Yeah. And another question by Deepak R. If HITRUST does not mean HIPAA compliance, wouldn't SOC 2 plus HIPAA, NIST, ISO be a better option than HITRUST? Does HIPAA compliance requirement reduce significantly after obtaining HITRUST compliance? I think there are three questions in this. One is, if HITRUST does not mean HIPAA compliance, would SOC 2 plus HIPAA be a better option than HITRUST? The answer is yes. But HITRUST, is a combination of multiple framework. If you want to have a better framework to your organization, through which you want to, assess all the various risks that multiple frameworks are probably raising it, or rather, trying to cover, then HITRUST would be a better framework that you want to probably, follow it, rather than following NIST, HIPAA, ISO. You can probably go with HITRUST. The HIPAA compliance requirements reduce significantly after obtaining the HITRUST compliance. As I said, HIPAA is a law. You need to adhere everything that HIPAA has. So I would not directly correlate HITRUST to HIPAA, but to precisely answer, yes, your point is correct. While I'm HITRUST certified, I would rather say 60 to 70% would get covered as part of your HITRUST itself. I mean, the HIPAA requirement around 60 to 70% will get covered as part of my HITRUST, but that too relates to your, the security and the privacy aspect. Next question, can we get this text for reference purpose? I leave that question to the IIA team to respond to that. Maybe Deepika, you want to answer this in the end. Satish, make a note of this email ID, Narayan ID, narain_or@hotmail.com. We will write to you, sir, on the CMM and CIQ. Hi, Karthik. What is the major change in the new standard SSA 21 that becomes effective from June 15, 2021? It's very early for us to say about SSA, the new standard, Kishore. The reason is that, I think it's not relevant over here for the main reason is talking about SOC 2 Plus in terms of, what is its relevance, but to make it more, in terms of that, is again, they're trying to make the party more responsible on the subject matter. However, the responsibility will be, not required to be, from an evaluating purpose, but then the responsibility is getting more, will be on the respective, the third parties or the subcontractors. But we can have a separate session on this SSI 21. We're also brainstorming on that in terms of what will be more that we need to cover. There's something I may not be able to answer at the moment, but I will definitely come back in the future while we, have some sessions around that. So do you want to add anything on the latest cyber attack on AIM server? Okay, Ravi sir, you were there on the call. Maybe he'll be the best person to answer this. Not sure if he's there on the call. Deepika can check if Ravi sir is there on the call.
Yes, checking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, so there's a question that we have. Can you do you want to add anything on the latest cyber attack on AIM server, where the data privacy was affected? So do you want to take this question?
No. What's the objective behind this question? Any specific thing?
Pratyusha, we want to unmute.
Is there specific background on this?
Hello,
Karthik,
sir.
you can-
Hello.
Yeah, Deepika.
Yeah, Pratyusha, we can hear you. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yes,
You were-
sir. Sir,
yeah, go ahead.
actually, as per the Economic Times news, so the as per certain guidelines and response team, it was observed that on November 25th, an attack has been happened on AIMS server where the several VIPs and including ministers' data has been hacked by hackers and demanded cryptocurrency to get back the data. And team was working on restoring the data back to the new servers by cleaning the data again through our Indian teams. So, who will be held responsible on this? And what are all the measures to be taken? And despite having these many guidelines to be followed, and what may be the actual cause behind this? Our servers have been compromised. So, anything can we have to take more care? Can you add anything on this? In general sense, I was asking.
Madam, this is a good question. Only thing is, Karthik, from a HIPAA guideline perspective, can you answer that? Maybe if more details, we can take it offline. But from a HIPAA perspective, if there was a healthcare organization getting attacked, what will be the precaution? What is the mechanism you have to disclose, etc., etc.?
Sure, sir. Yeah. So, madam, from the HIPAA perspective, right? So, if at all, the data are being, under breach, the data are being compromised. If that is going to, affect around more than 500 customers, then you may have to, report back to your the covered entity, and they may the covered entity have to, report it back to the regulatory authorities, and thereby accordingly they will evaluate it. And then, if there is found to be that some control lapses are there, and there will be a penalty that will be imposed on the covered entity and the business associate. To answer your question precisely, while data breach is happened or not has not been happened, we'll have to await for more forensic related data or report. But then we'll be able to understand, because all the data are being really encrypted, right? So whether the hacker has decrypted it or whether he got access to data is still under a question. I think you have to await for more details on this by the journalist or from the AIMS team as well. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. This is a separate topic by itself, madam. We will take this offline. That's right. And then I think Deepika can make a note of this email ID from Shobhan. Vasant, thank you. And relevance to HIPAA part alone. Yeah, I will leave that for the IIA to decide. Is there a certification mechanism under HIPAA for HIPAA compliance? As I said, there is no certification that is all for HIPAA. All that you can go for is a gap assessment, which you can share with your customer, or you can use SOC2 plus HIPAA, which you can provide that. What value does HIPAA attribute to SOC2 or a SOC2 plus HIPAA certificate? As I said, that is what the whole part of it is, that through SOC2, you can provide an audit report on the HIPAA framework. The second aspect is that SOC2 and HIPAA have a lot of commonalities together, while HIPAA is more like a gap assessment report is what you can have. But through a SOC2, you can provide an independent audit report using the HIPAA framework that you can provide it to your customer, and through which you'll be able to take reliance on the audit report because it comes from an independent third-party auditor. Okay. I think we answered all the questions. I think we're also over about 5 minutes. So thank you. Thanks a lot for an active session. Back to you, Deepika. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Karthik and Sridharan, for this excellent session. And thank you for all the patiently answering all our participants' questions. I think we had a very great session. We have retained all our audience till the end, even though we are over time. That was wonderful. Looking forward for more sessions. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for everyone for the active participation. Looking forward. Thank you.
Thanks, audience, for the great participation. Thanks.
Yeah.